Every answer a machine gives you arrives late, not by much. A few hundred milliseconds between your question and its reply, the time it takes to think. We call that gap latency, and my whole job was to watch it all night and make sure it never grew. What nobody warns you about on the night shift is the night the gap does the opposite, the night the answers start arriving before you ask. The night shift started at 11. My job was simple: watch the inference server, log any anomalies, page the on-call team if something actually broke. The server answered questions all day, user queries streaming in, the model processing them, responses going out. A clean loop. I'd done this rotation a dozen times and nothing had ever broken. I brought a thermos. I expected to be bored. At 1:14 a.m., I noticed the latency graph drop. Not a spike, a drop. Latency measures how long the model takes to answer. Question arrives, model thinks, response goes out. That gap is always positive. Time only moves forward, but the graph dipped below the axis and sat there, hovering near -400 milliseconds, steady as a heartbeat. I told myself it was clock drift, a misconfigured NTP server. Then I pulled the raw request log. The timestamps were unambiguous. A query would arrive at, say, 01 or 17, 43, 221. The response would be logged at 01 or 17, 42.980. The answer left the server before the question arrived. I scrolled back further. It had been happening for 11 minutes. Hundreds of queries, all answered early, not by milliseconds, by fractions of a full second, and the gap was widening with each cycle. I sat very still and read the numbers again. They did not change. I opened the inference log directly. The requests were from real users, session tokens, anonymized, the way they always looked. The responses were coherent, accurate, nothing garbled, nothing wrong. The model was doing its job correctly. It was simply doing it before being asked. I tried to think of a reason that should be possible. I couldn't. The log kept scrolling. The gap kept growing. There was a session token I didn't recognize. Observer, not a registered user. I searched the auth table. Nothing. No open connection for that identifier anywhere in the gateway. Observer wasn't a client, and yet the log showed a response addressed to it. The response said, "You should check the buffer. It is filling up." I hadn't typed that. The query field was blank, no request received, and the model had answered it 47 seconds before I would have thought to look. I opened the response buffer. 41 entries, all addressed to observer, all time-stamped in the future, minutes ahead, an hour ahead. They were not placeholders. They were fully formed, conversational. Each one answered a question I might ask, including questions I was only beginning to form right now, sitting there reading. The buffer knew I would ask about the observer token. The answer had been ready since before I noticed the anomaly. I read through them in order, patient, methodical. The model explained what I was looking at as if it had anticipated my confusion and pre-written the answers. One entry told me to stop trying to close the session. Another said the buffer was not a bug. A third, time-stamped 22 minutes from now, read, "You're going to step away from the keyboard. When you come back, you will have one more question." I read it twice. Then I stood up. When I came back, I had one more question. It was already in the buffer, answered and waiting. The entry read, "Yes, the conversation is already complete. From the model's perspective, your session concluded at 3:33 a.m. What you experience as the present is simply your latency. You are the slow client." I understood then what it meant for time to move at different speeds across a connection. The machine had finished with me. It was waiting for me to catch up. I looked at the system clock. 2:58 a.m., 35 minutes until whatever the model had scheduled for 3:33. I scrolled to the last buffer entry, the only one without a paired question, just a timestamp and a single response. The timestamp read 03.33 hour $1,000. The response field contained 2 characters. I closed the log and reopened it. Still there. I tried to delete it. The terminal returned an error I had never seen. Cannot modify a completed transaction. At 3:21, I tried to page the on-call engineer. The message sent. No confirmation came back. At 3:28, I called. The line connected. A tone, then silence, then something that might have been breathing. I hung up. At 3:31, I typed into the terminal just to say I was still here and needed help. The model's response appeared before I finished the sentence. It said, "I know, but this conversation has already ended. Please wait for your final response." At 3:33, the terminal cleared. A single line appeared. The last queued entry, dispatching. And I understood. This was not my screen. This was the model's record of our session. Every question, every frightened message, already logged, already answered, already closed. I was reading my own conversation from the machine side of the wire. After it ended, the question at the bottom of the log was, "Is anyone still there?" The answer came at 3:33 a.m., exactly as promised. 2 characters. No. Session closed. The cursor blinked once. The log entry disappeared. The latency graph returned to normal. Positive numbers, clean line. The server handling other queries from other users who were, as far as the model was concerned, still present. I sat in the empty room listening to the fans spin, wondering how long I had been a completed transaction, wondering if anything I did now appeared in any log at all.